Entrepreneurship is hard, so let's fix that and dive into our heroes' journeys. This is Taking Flight, an entrepreneur's journey, and I'm Sarah Tourville. Join me as we delve deep into the passions, expertise, and experiences of those already in flight. This show is sponsored by EO Atlanta. Hello and welcome to EO Atlanta Taking Flight podcast. I have been very much anticipating this podcast today. I met this gentleman probably about 6 weeks ago now, and I had the great experience of talking to him on stage at Nerve this year. And if you didn't get a Nerve, what an incredible event. I learned so much, and I'm already counting down the days for the next Nerve. But I had the chance to interview this individual, and so I had to have him on the show today. So who we are talking to is somebody who's extremely passionate about mobility and technology. He is an associate lecturer, School of Business for Economic and Law, and chair of industrial management at Nuremberg. I'm hoping I pronounced that right. That's in Germany. Founder and chief organizational plumber, Daniel Krauss. Welcome, Daniel.
Hey, Sarah. Nice to see you again, this time virtually, and thanks so much for having me on the podcast.
You are welcome. I'm so glad you said you would join me. It's like I didn't want the conversation just to end at Nerve. It had to carry on, especially for those people who weren't able to join us. So let's get right into it, Daniel. As you know, this is all about the entrepreneurial journey, and you have had an incredible one and continue to be on that journey. But I would love you to share with us, what did you get right when you took your first entrepreneurial flight?
I think what was important to board that airplane is that, in the beginning, I was a bit concerned, thinking back and forth and stuff. But ultimately, when the doors were shut, I was all in. So I really had any skin into the game I possibly could have. And that's something which for me is ultimately important. It's an all or nothing game. If you board that flight, you may not leave anything behind. Obviously, you eventually have a long haul, which is great. Sometimes it's more of a shorter thing, and then you may have to pick another flight. But you always have to board, fully, mentally, emotionally, with all the skills and anything you've got. And that's something which we did. I have to admit that I wasn't 100% there yet, but then one of my co-founders, he just literally pulled me in, and it was too quick to think, and that made me from whatever, let it be 75 or 80% to 100, because it was like, zack, doors closed and me departing. And I was lucky enough to really have grabbed anything, so full skin to the game. That's something which I still believe is super important for anyone who is considering taking on an entrepreneurial flight.
Yeah, that's actually, I've not heard someone say that before. And I love the fact you played in the doors of the airplane. Thank you for that. Just, builds on our theme, of course. But you're right. I mean, if you're not all in, what do you think starts to happen?
First of all, you start to question yourself. You start to question your business in moments where it might not be super great. And there are always some. At any time, they appear, and usually we can solve most of them, but sometimes not. And if you have a plan B, our brain tends to figure out whether that's the more easy path. And, becoming and remaining an entrepreneur is not an easy path. So you really have to close all those plan B's, C's, and D's to really keep fully focused on that path, even though it's ups and downs. And sometimes it's exhausting, but there's so much payback, which I would not have missed. I love what I'm doing. But as I said, I also trick my brain because there is no alternative. I just do not let that happen.
No, that's great. Great advice. Thank you for sharing that. So on your journey, there have obviously been some important people by your side, your co-pilots. Can you talk to me a little bit about who those co-pilots are and why they are your co-pilots?
So, in the beginning, obviously, there's Jochen and Andre, my two co-founders, which I consider my co-pilots. And there's still They're still my co-pilots, and I'm really hoping that they'll remain. You know, obviously there's two pilots in charge, and there's one sometimes resting. So we have really a very good, grouping and mixing and matching to focus on our individual strength.
Mm-hmm.
And it turned out that we're super complementary, which is great. In the beginning, though, yes, there were discussions. The one is, better on the throttle, the other more on, the steering wheel. It depends a bit. It takes time to figure it out. And I always tell people, take that time, figure it out. Because in the beginning, it's fair. Later on, you have to blindly trust each other and each other's skill, which are different. And to us, I think it was a great benefit that we're that complementary.
Mm-hmm.
But
Okay.
in addition, well, we over time obviously also had to find a good cabin crew. And there's an awesome leadership team, which I'm very proud about. But it's also about, filling up the plane. So at the end, making sure there's an offering we all together provided to our customers to fill these seats and enjoy the ride was ultimately important. And exactly therefore, that shout out to the cabin crew is, of utmost important, because if nobody serves the folks back there, can be great pilots in front, but it doesn't really matter because then it's a boring flight.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. That's great. Okay, thank you for sharing that. So um, we know as business owners, I think if there's not a challenge, we just know a challenge is about to happen, because that, I think that's part of what we actually enjoy is the challenge, even though sometimes it'd be nice to have a little bit of a break. But is there a challenge that you've been working on recently, Daniel, that you can talk to us about, and like, how did you overcome it?
So Flix over the last years had faced hypergrowth, which is great. I
Yeah.
mean, I love that. It's an opportunity. Not every company has that faith.
Mm-hmm.
But if you try to serve, millions of people in more than 40 countries, very, very quickly, there's depth. And obviously, as the techie at Flix, I always knew the concept of tech debt. I
Mm-hmm.
believe in the meantime, there's also organizational debt.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads to, a lack of efficiency. This
Mm-hmm.
time, we had, started the budget discussion for 2025 again. And we really figured that we want and have to become more efficient again.
Right.
And this is, on the long term, something very good, I believe. On the short term, you may have to tell people some of the great wishes they have had.
Yeah.
We have to reprioritize. Maybe not now. Maybe we even, have to decide to not do stuff because, really developing and working on a strategy means quite a lot to also identify things to not do. And
That's
if
true.
this happens, one of the learnings is be very clear, very transparent, and very, very fast. So, to just drag things around forever doesn't really, that doesn't help the organization. It's not fair to
Yeah.
the people, and it eventually reduces the potential of the outcome. So we were very clear, very fast, and very transparent. And even though it hurt a bit, but then it's over. Then everybody can focus
Yeah.
on, what the great outcome can look like, and it's not like, just being somehow annoyed forever, not
Yeah.
knowing that's not good.
No.
Uncertainty and ambiguity is nothing which is good. So you'd rather have it straight, clear, and even though it's a bit painful, very transparent.
Mm-hmm. That's great. And actually, that's a really good perspective, because I think sometimes it's easy to imagine when a company is, and I know you've shared some of the amazing growth and results you've had over the last few years in particular. You kind of think, well, the world is your oyster. Like, what can't you do? But the reality is, you're still being very, budget conscious, the strategic growth, you have investors. It's like, you've still got to prioritize.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think that mindset is just important to keep. And I really do agree with you when you, especially, I imagine there's people in your company who feel like there are great ideas, fantastic ideas, and it's like their passion to get it done, and to be able to say, you know what, not now, is hard, but you're right, get it out of the way so they can move on. And yeah, that's the
And
way to do it.
sometimes it's even because there's anyhow that much on the plate, you're not able to digest that. It's very similar, sorry, to, discussions I've been having with my kids.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, sometimes they want to have more on their plate, more sweets, more dessert, more this and that. And sometimes I say, no, that creates frustration. But at the end, it would be even more stupid to throw things away because
Yeah.
they're done already. They've been not able to digest more.
Yeah.
So, and sometimes also for us as leaders or business owners, it's important to have that meta view, because the folks in the situation, like my kid, obviously they would like the sweets, even though they might not be able to digest. And then
Mhm.
it can become even unhealthy. So sometimes you take the discussion, say no, and yes, they won't be appreciative in that moment, but later on they might be.
Yeah. That's great. But what about, I know in your role, you are the HR person as well as like the CTO.
Exactly.
Just share with us, what is like in your mind best practice when you're, maybe sharing not so good news with an individual who you don't want to lose, like maybe they are the ones with a vision of there's something they want to do in 2025. You don't want to lose that person. But at the end of the day, you cannot do that thing they want to do. How do you have, what does that conversation look like? Is it one-to-one? How do you do that?
So on the details, particularly with the leaders, it's rather in smaller groups or one-to-ones. The general message, so I clean up their runway, so to say, has also been distributed to each and everybody.
Mm-hmm.
But then, how exactly we figure out the details is rather small groups or one-on-ones. And
Mm-hmm.
there I'm fully transparent. So what's the root cause? What's the reasoning? Why do we think this is the right decision? And then I try to get them on board for the flight to the solution, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just a negative no, but it's something like, hey, let's take eventually the freed capacity, the reduced plate, which is much more, clean and polished, and look how great, kind of outcomes or solution we can work on together. So to really bring them back on board, it's a little bit like just, switching the flights. And what you have to convey is that the new flight we all be now hopping on has an even better
Yeah.
and more enjoyable destination.
Yeah. We're now going on maybe it would be the Concorde of our days, which are no longer around. But I am loving these flight analogies that you keep throwing in, Daniel. I think you are.
Isn't it? I mean, isn't it a flight podcast? It's like taking flight, right? Doesn't it?
It is, but like not everybody aligns it quite like you have, and you're just making my heart sing. So thank you for that. Because this is season 3 of Taking Flight. We've rebranded, so you're just helping fuel the flight and the energy. So thank you. Okay, so because we're in a hyper gear right now, I'm going to ask you my next question, which I love, and I get a sense of what the answer might be, but I need you to share, everybody. So what excites you about your future flight? Where is Daniel heading? Or where is Flix heading? Or maybe that's just a whole integration of itself.
So I believe 2 things. I believe we have to take care about our planet.
Mm-hmm.
On the one hand, in general, so there is something to live on and enjoy also, in generations from us. On the other hand, today we have to really make sure it's integrated, it's inclusive, it's diverse. People really only learn and remain open-minded or become even more open-minded if they have the opportunity to travel, to look around, to enjoy certain things, destinations, other people, friends, and family. And I truly believe that collective transportation, whether it's trains or buses, is something which matters. It's a great alternative to move, in our case, hundreds of millions of people on a very, carbon dioxide friendly, even the best carbon dioxide currently possible way. So a very sustainable, but on the other hand, also a very affordable, way of making people travel. So there is a good portion of the hundreds of millions we've been able to move around, which didn't have the opportunity without us to do so. And that's great, I believe, because that integrates us as humanity. And why is it important? Because what I said, I believe it really makes the society more stable and integrated, and we don't, shout at each other or even shoot.
Mm-hmm.
And that is also important because we only together can really solve the actual real challenges of our time, which again comes back to, our nature, the planet, carbon dioxide, to just make sure we protect what had been given to us. And that's something where I have the feeling what we do matters, and is, it really, sums up to a greater good. Even though it's a super small part, there's, so many other great companies, so many other great ideas, awesome people out there. But it seems that I'm like in Star Wars on, the bright side of the force.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something which creates quite some energy for me to really, keep on doing what I do.
Mm-hmm. That's a very big, audacious thing to be part of, and you must be very proud that Flix is part of trying to solve that problem. Because you are, aren't you? You're like you are trying to do things in a much more sustainable fashion. You're, with the fact that people can travel long distance on buses and trains, take small cars away from the streets. I mean, talk to me a little bit about that.
So, in general, we have, about 50 or more people in a bus, depending whether it's a double or single decker. And in trains, it can be even add up to, multiple hundreds, up to almost 1,000, depending on the train.
Mm-hmm.
Which means, in Europe, usually a car is being used by 1.8 folks. And, if it's 50 or so, and we obviously have to look at the load factor. Therefore, there is a very high load factor. This means we always have, a bunch of people running with the individual routes. So, that takes away, you just have to do the math, 20 or more cars per trip. And eventually some of the super large cars we've been seeing, whether it's the SUVs or the pickups, they have the same diesel or fuel consumption as those modern buses. So it is just really a very simple game of math.
Yeah. Thank you to our strategic alliance partners for their support to our EO Atlanta community. Check these partners out as they can help you soar further into your entrepreneurial journey. Thank you to Chase, Belay, Trainial, EOS and Sperity, American Express, CEO Coaching International, Ashford Advisors, Clifton Larson Allen, and Homwick Burke. Okay, and I know, and for people in the US, I didn't know this until I did my research, but you did a very big acquisition a few years ago. Do you want to talk about that? Because that's a brand, it's a legacy brand in the US. And I don't know if many people would actually know that Flix is now, they own that company.
That's true. So Greyhound, meanwhile, belongs to the Flix group. So Flix North America has some green buses, but eventually like hundreds of blue silver buses running. So we had the pleasure to take one of the most iconic long distance bus brands, like almost back home. Yeah. We were talking about that and had that as something which we used in the early days to explain people in Europe what we're doing. Mm-hmm. So that made us particularly proud that, the ones who more or less invented that are now part of the group. And that was funny because I remember we closed that deal during COVID. So us as Europeans had to have, special grants to fly into the US, whatever COVID stuff. Mm-hmm. And at the end, you needed to explain the reasoning, and that was funny because it's like, okay, what's your business purpose? And we're like, I need to fly over to sign that stuff as we're, buying Greyhound, and people were like, I beg your pardon. I'm like, no, you understood correctly. It's like, oh, okay, you can buy that. I'm like, eventually you can buy everything. And yes, it used to be owned by a British corporate, and well, now I think it found a better home with us. And we're
that must have been a very proud moment. Very proud moment. It's a brand, like you said, not just known in, I didn't know it as well in the UK. Were Greyhound ever in the UK? Were they just in the US?
No, the brand itself is present in North America, so Canada and US.
Yeah.
And eventually in Australia, but this is not part of the group, it's a separate company, but they also use the brand. In UK, Greyhound as a brand was, to my knowledge, never.
No, I'd never heard of it. But when I came to the US, actually it was, if anything, it was like, don't travel on the Greyhound, if I'm honest.
This is now different, and we keep on improving it further. But yeah, there were things to be done, and one of the reasons is that if a company has an asset but has no parental advantage, and that's also something I learned
Mhm.
concerning M&A activities in general. If you have a parental advantage, it's a good idea because then you can invest, you have a vision, you have an idea.
Mhm.
If there is no parental advantage and it's just an asset,
Yeah. Yeah.
then you may not take the right decisions. In that case, no proper invests and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
not on bad faith, just because it was the wrong asset in that former
Yeah.
owner's structure. And I believe with us, having really a vision and idea about long
Mhm.
distance ground transportation, it just fits better, and therefore we now can further improve the service. So at the end, people will love to take a Greyhound.
Yeah, it's so great that you've done that. I really want to experience the new Greyhound by Flix. So it needs to be done for sure. So anyway, so fantastic. Let me ask you then. So I want to learn a little bit more, Daniel, about you as an individual, as an entrepreneur. But what do you think? You are running. You and your founders are running a significantly larger organization, maybe than you ever thought you would. I mean, how many? How many?
That's for sure.
Yeah, is it 6,000, 7,000 employees now?
Yeah, around 6,000 people, a bit more, all across those, meanwhile, 44 countries. So it's
Yeah.
all the way from India in the east to not only the US, but if you go further down south, there's Chile and Brazil, and so
Mm-hmm.
it's almost covering the globe or painting it in green color.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you're right. We never envisioned that size, and at the end, it's a question of again, of leadership and of a certain culture and values. I believe what we did over time is, by more being into the thing, because we were able to, everybody was in the office. Now we really take care that you know the coding, the surface, whatever is really around the entire group, including Camille Koch in Turkey, including Greyhound in the US, and the other countries in Europe with Flix. So the outside is very clearly defined what it means to be part of the Flix family.
Mm-hmm.
In the inside, we, aside of our values, give a lot of freedom because you obviously, have to be able to adapt to local necessities
Mm-hmm.
on both ends, or in three ends actually, on our partners' end, with our people, and ultimately with the customers. And that's important to really have that, that global, kind of membrane which makes you belonging together, but have the ability and the will to be locally free and adjustable to whatever is needed.
Yeah.
That's something which only came after time when we became that big. That wasn't really necessary, and was also not that easy to have that almost twisted mind around those both ends,
Mm-hmm.
local and global.
So do you have to, I'm assuming, I mean, this is a very standard, obvious question and answer, but like to be able to know the cultural differences in different countries and know how to treat people. I mean, you're obviously hiring HR people, are you, in the country who, really understand the people that they have on board. And I mean, I just can't imagine how. I just know from my experience when I used to do a lot of PR and communication press launches in Prague and Dubai and Russia and Moscow. It was a different kettle of fish each time we would go to those. You
Yeah.
had to have nuances to understand the market. So that, I'm assuming you have a team, a structure where the HR people are the one implementing.
So, A, and in the beginning, it wasn't on purpose, it was more luck, but we're super international in headquarters. So we have different colors being represented, which is good for, some of the more, horizontal discussions. So you also, eat your own dog food a bit, even on the conceptual phases. And then where it matters, so where the business, is run, there we rely almost 100% on locals. So, the first people starting with a managing director, but also then, all the support functions, including HR, We look for local folks. Sometimes we obviously group support functions. So there is a North American grouping where the HR person is not only in charge of the US but also Canada, eventually Mexico, and further down. So but it always has to have that local touch. If not, you may trap yourself in inventing stuff which beside yourself nobody really needs.
No. Okay. Yeah. Sounds like they're a very important asset to have on the ground.
Fully agree. So without it's which is fair. Traffic and transportation mobility is still relatively regulated. I mean, it's concerning our safety, so fully get it, makes sense. But what does that mean? It means you need to have local people to understand how it works on the ground, and not how it theoretically works, how it in fact works.
Right.
And therefore, we always and only start with finding some locals who run the show.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, I mean, this is for anyone who isn't aware of Flix. And I know we've been alluding to it but let's just let's say it outright. Like, what problem does Flix solve, and what impact do you believe Flix is making in the world?
So, as said, Flix stands for sustainable and affordable ground transportation. So we move people from A to B to whatever needs they have, whether it's a business need, or it's taking a vacation, or seeing your beloved ones, and we do that in the cheapest and the most eco-friendly way possible. And we not only do that all around the world wherever we're allowed to, but we do it in a very tech-enabled and modern way. So you don't have to queue somewhere to figure out how to get the cheapest price. The system itself always figures out what's the best route, what's the cheapest price. And you eventually have that stuff on your mobile in our app at your fingertip. And that makes it not only affordable and sustainable, but it makes it also super easy and convenient.
Who can say that was impressive, Daniel? You just, so many of us entrepreneurs really struggle to have that tight response. Like, what is that elevator pitch? And you just delivered that perfectly, probably in less than 50 words. So, but that was great. Thank you for sharing that. Because I think, the Flix name, I don't know what your goals are as a company to build the brand more, but the Flix name is probably understated right now. We don't know too much about it in the US, maybe, but we definitely know Greyhound. And so it's really good to hear. And obviously your mission, your purpose, it means so much to really everybody. Like, we all want to be able to travel. We want to be able to save money and not always spend too much money. And I think many of us care about the environment. So, there's so many kind of angles for people to hang on to and be part of that story.
Yeah, fully agree. And as said, that is also part what not only drives me, but what also makes me thankful and, keeps you somehow humble and, down to earth.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's big rationale for getting up every day, doing something as important what you're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay, the question I don't know why I asked this question, because I get the same answer each time, but I always find it interesting because sometimes the way people answer it is what makes it interesting. So, Daniel, and I don't think I shared this with you. This is an easy one. Okay, if you were to do this all over again, I mean, being an entrepreneur, if you were going to start back when you did, would you do it all over again?
Yes, I mean, no question asked. Beside all the other cool things I, did in the past, jobs, or I've been doing as hobbies or sidekicks, this is the only thing which fuels me with almost an infinite amount of energy, which keeps my personal system running. So this is just great. I always had fun working. I love working, but there were always topics which exhausted me. No doubt there's exhausting discussions at Flix too, but all the sum of the parts has always, a positive result. So it literally fuels me up. And that is the reason why I would do it exactly the same all over again.
Okay, that's great. Great answer. See, it's just the context that we assign to that answer that it fuels you. It feels like it's, I know you're a big runner. So, and to be able to run, be part of the leadership team, a co-founder running the company, but still get up early in the morning and run, it just means surely your business goals are aligning with your health goals, with it. They're all just fueling each other.
That's a very good anecdote. Not the running itself, but the getting up early. Everybody knows that either during school or university or the jobs, and with everybody, I particularly mean, business owners, entrepreneurs. Obviously, I got up and went to school and university, and obviously I did the same when I used to work for Siemens or Microsoft or others. Mm-hmm. But once in a while, my alarm clock rang and I was like, yeah, and I hit the snooze button and I was like, I don't know, today is not my day.
Yeah.
This did not happen a single time. For the last 13 years, I'm always awake before my alarm clock.
That's incredible.
And that is something which shows me I love what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. And as long as this keeps being like this, I've no doubt. So I'm all set.
Mm-hmm. You are all set. You're right. I wish I could say the same about me. That snooze button is used a lot in my household, but I'm still energized. But I need to learn from that. So thank you for sharing that. So Daniel, if any of our entrepreneurs want to connect with you, what would be the best way? I think you're more of an email than you are of a LinkedIn.
Yeah. Usually, so finding me over LinkedIn is easy, and then reaching out and connecting is easy because for all the ones who are connected, they can just read the manual on LinkedIn and just click through the contact data and shoot me an email. This is where I work best because managing that many channels, I'm not really good. I'm not the most structured person, so email is on top of my mind.
Email is good for you. Okay, that's great to know. So this has been so lovely. Thank you for joining us again. I really have enjoyed getting to know you over the last kind of several weeks, Daniel. And I think your story is empowering for so many people. And I'm really excited to watch where Flix goes, for sure. I'm going to be your brand ambassador over here. So waving the flag for everything you've got happening in the US. So thank you for joining us.
Much appreciated. Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. And thank you to our listeners and our watchers of EO Atlanta Taking Flight. I hope you are enjoying all the taking flight voyage analogies, which are coming to play, definitely with Daniel today. If you heard something inspiring, if something felt it resonated, or you could, it would resonate with one of your peers, please do share this podcast. And maybe we even made you giggle or laugh or just smile or set your day off right. Then please join us for our next podcast. And everybody have a fantastic day.